They built the trap themselves. Every wire, every wall, every carefully placed question designed to make you crack. Oh, and I watched them polish it like a trophy they had not even won yet. They called it a test. I call it the funniest thing I have ever seen. Because the moment they set it up, they handed you the one thing they never intended to. A mirror. And you looked right into it. Not with fear, not with shame, with something they never calculated for, clarity. I have seen men crumble inside traps far smaller than this one. I have seen whole systems collapse the second someone refused to perform for them. But you turned their little stage into your confession booth. You turned their evidence into your armor. And now I am going to tell you exactly how it happened. Every move, every mistake they made, starting with the one they made before the test even began. They planned it in a room I was never supposed to know about. Small room, smaller minds. They sat around a table and they mapped out every version of you, every weakness, every wound, every word they thought would make you fold. Oh, the confidence in that room. You could practically smell it. That particular cologne worn by people who have never once been wrong about anything, because they have never once been honest with themselves. They decided what you were before you walked in. They wrote the ending first, then built the story backwards. That is not a test. That is a verdict dressed up in procedure, and I know that move. I invented that move. They gave you a chair that was just slightly too low. Did you notice? Most people do not. It is the oldest trick in the architecture of humiliation. Make someone physically smaller, and their mind begins to believe it too. They controlled the lighting. They controlled the silence. They even controlled the pause before the first question. That long, theatrical pause meant to make you feel like you had already done something wrong. Oh, I almost admired it, almost. Because here is the thing about people who design traps with that much care. They are terrified, genuinely, deeply terrified. You do not build a cage that elaborate for something you are not afraid of. They asked you questions that were not questions. You understood that, did you not? Why did you do it that way? Is not curiosity. It is an accusation wearing a question mark like a costume. Do you think that was the right decision? Is not reflection. It is a blade wrapped in wool. And I watched you sit with those blades. I watched you feel the edges, and then, oh, this is the part I love. You did not bleed the way they needed you to. You answered, calmly, completely, not because you were rehearsed, not because you were performing, but because the truth, your truth, did not require decoration. And that broke something in the room. Here is the first thing they got wrong. They assumed your silence before speaking was hesitation. It was not. It was selection. There is a difference, a magnificent, devastating difference, between a person who pauses because they are lost and a person who pauses because they are choosing exactly which word will land exactly where it needs to. They mistook precision for weakness. Oh, that mistake. That beautiful, costly mistake. I have made enemies that way too. Underestimated in the quiet, dismissed in the stillness. And then suddenly, everyone in the room is wondering how the conversation slipped out of their hands without a single dramatic moment to point to. No outburst. No tears, no confession they could use, just you, sitting in that too-low chair, answering every blade with a fact. And then came the moment they never scripted for. You asked them a question back, one question, soft voice, no accusation in it, just a simple, clean question that required them to either lie out loud or admit something they had spent the whole meeting carefully burying. The silence after that question. Oh, that silence had weight. It pressed against the ceiling. It filled every corner of that small, proud room. And in that silence, without raising your voice, without standing up, without doing anything they could document or punish, you became the most dangerous person in the building. They built the test to expose you. But what it exposed was them. Every assumption, every fear, every pre-written ending they had already agreed on before you sat down in that chair. And now they are sitting with something they did not budget time for. The possibility that they were wrong about you from the very beginning. Oh, that thought. That is the one that keeps people like them awake at 3 a.m, staring at the ceiling, replaying a meeting they were supposed to control. There is a specific moment in every trap when the trap maker knows. They do not say it. They will never say it out loud, but you can see it if you know where to look. It lives in the microsecond between their question and their breath. That tiny, almost invisible flinch when the answer they receive is not the answer they rehearsed a response for. Oh, I have lived inside that flinch. I have built entire philosophies around it. Because that flinch, that small involuntary crack in the performance, is the most honest thing a controlled person will ever show you. And you saw it, did you not? They had a lead voice in that room. There always is. The one who does most of the talking. The one who holds the folder a little tighter than necessary. The one whose eyes move to the others every time you give an answer they did not expect. Checking, always checking, whether the group is still with them. That checking, that sideways glance, is not leadership. It is panic wearing a collared shirt, because a person who is truly certain does not need the room to confirm it for them every 30 seconds. I know certainty. Real certainty is quiet. Real certainty does not look left and right. Real certainty looks straight ahead, directly at the thing it is not afraid of. And the lead voice in that room had not looked straight ahead since the moment you stopped reacting the way they planned. They escalated. Of course they did. When the soft questions failed, they reached for the sharper ones. The ones designed to touch old wounds. The ones that drag up history like furniture pulled across a floor. Loud, deliberate, meant to disturb. You have a pattern, one of them said. Oh, a pattern. I almost stood up and applauded, because you have a pattern is the last resort of someone who cannot argue with what is in front of them. So they gesture vaguely at everything behind you. And I watched you do something that took more discipline than most people will ever understand. You did not defend the past. You let it sit there on the table between you like an object neither of you owned. You simply said, "Tell me specifically what you mean." 4 words, quiet, precise, surgical. And suddenly the pattern, their grand, sweeping pattern, had to become something concrete, something they could name, something they could date, something that could be examined under actual light, and it could not survive that. This is the first twist I want you to sit with. The test was never about finding truth. It was about producing a reaction, a specific reaction. Guilt, defensiveness, emotional collapse, something they could then interpret as confirmation of the story they had already written about you. They were not investigators, they were directors, and you refused to act. Oh, that refusal, that calm, almost gentle refusal to perform the breakdown they had budgeted time for. It did not just disrupt the meeting, it dismantled the entire premise. Because if you were everything they said you were, guilty, unstable, cornered, you would have cracked exactly when they turned up the pressure. You did not crack. And now the story they wrote about you has a structural problem they cannot quietly fix. I have been in rooms like that, not as the one being tested, as the one watching from the margins, counting exits, cataloging every face. And I will tell you what I always noticed. The people running the test are always performing too. They perform authority. They perform certainty. They perform the role of people who have every right to sit on that side of the table. But performance requires an audience that believes it. And the second you stopped believing it, the second your eyes said quietly, without malice, I see what this actually is, their performance lost its stage. Oh, there is nothing more disorienting for a person in power than being truly, calmly seen. They tried one more thing before the room shifted completely. They introduced someone new, brought them in mid-session, unannounced, sat them down without explanation. Classic move. The sudden unknown variable designed to reset your nervous system, to make you feel like the ground just moved, to force you to recalculate while they stay still. But here is what they forgot about people who have already survived the worst version of this. You do not recalculate from fear anymore. You recalculate from data. You looked at the new face. You noted what they were holding, where they sat, whether they made eye contact, and for how long. And in about 11 seconds, I counted, you knew exactly what role they had been brought in to play. And you smiled. Not wide, not theatrical, just the corners. Just enough. And oh, that small smile cost them more than anything else you did that day. Because a person who smiles when a new threat enters the room is a person who is no longer operating from survival. They are operating from understanding. And understanding in a room built on fear and control is the most subversive thing you can carry. They designed the test to measure your breaking point. What they found instead was that they had already passed theirs. Here is what nobody tells you about power. Real power does not announce itself. It does not clear its throat before speaking. It does not need the room arranged in its favor. It does not arrive early to control the seating. Real power walks in, and the room rearranges itself without being asked. What was in that room that day, what they were wielding so carefully, so deliberately with such architectural precision, was not power. It was the performance of power. And oh, there is a canyon between those two things, a beautiful, merciless canyon. I have fallen into it myself. I know exactly how far down it goes. They started making small errors after the smile, not dramatic ones, nothing you could point to in a report. But I saw them. The lead voice began repeating phrases, using the same 3 words in different arrangements, cycling back to points already made, covering the same ground twice, as if repetition could transform it into something stronger. It cannot. Repetition does not build an argument. It reveals that the argument has run out of places to go. One of the others in the room began writing things down that did not need to be written down. That is not note-taking. That is displacement. That is the hand doing something because the mind no longer knows what to do. And the new face they brought in, the variable meant to unsettle you, had gone very, very quiet. Oh, quiet in that way that means someone is privately revising everything they agreed to before they walked into the room. And then it happened. The thing they never scripted. The confession that wore the costume of a question. Why do you think people find you so difficult to read? That was the question. Sit with it for a moment. Really sit with it. Because that question, dressed up as psychological inquiry, is actually a disclosure. It tells you that they have been trying to read you. It tells you that they have failed. It tells you that this failure has unsettled them enough that they are now openly asking you to solve it for them. They just told you the exact shape of their anxiety. And oh, I felt something almost like tenderness watching that. Almost. Because there is something achingly human about a person so desperate for control that they accidentally hand you the map to every place inside them where the control runs out. This is the second twist, the emotional one, and I need you to feel this one properly. They were not trying to destroy you. They were afraid of you. There is a difference, and it matters more than anything else I will say today. Destruction is cold, methodical. Destruction does not flinch, and it does not escalate, and it absolutely does not bring in a new face halfway through hoping the scenery change will do what the questions could not. Fear does all of those things. Fear over-prepares. Fear builds traps with too many moving parts. Fear writes the ending before the story begins, because it cannot tolerate not knowing. Every single thing they did in that room, the low chair, the loaded questions, the pattern accusation, the sudden new variable, was not the behavior of people with power over you. It was the behavior of people who needed power over you because something about you made them feel they were losing it. And oh, you never even tried to take it. That is the part that must haunt them. You gave them every reasonable thing, honest answers, measured responses. You did not perform innocence, which is what guilty people do. You simply described reality in calm, complete sentences and let them decide what to do with it. And that is the thing about truth when it is spoken without desperation. It does not argue. It does not defend. It does not raise its voice. It simply sits there, solid and patient, and waits for everything built on something weaker to eventually fall against it. I do not know what you want from me, one of them finally said, and I felt you almost smile again. Because that sentence, that exhausted, unguarded sentence, was the most honest thing spoken in that room since the whole performance began. What they wanted from you was a reaction that matched the story they had already written, and you never gave it to them. Not because you were strategic, not because you were cold, but because the story they wrote about you was never true, and truth, even when it is tired, even when it is sitting in a too low chair, does not perform lies to make liars comfortable. The room changed after that sentence. Not loudly, not with any moment you could frame and hang on a wall. It changed the way water changes a stone, slowly, invisibly, and permanently. The folder was closed, not filed, not referenced. Closed. Closed the way you close something you no longer want to look at. The writing hand stopped writing. The lead voice looked at the window for 3 full seconds, as if the answer to something might be hovering just outside the glass. It was not. And here is what I want you to understand about everything that just happened in that room. They came to extract a confession from you, but the only confession made that day belonged to them. In every overbuilt question, in every sideways glance at the group, in that one exhausted sentence at the end, they confessed their fear, their desperation, their absolute paralyzing inability to handle a person who simply refused to become what they needed them to be. Oh, the irony of that, the beautiful, almost poetic irony. They set up a perfect test to expose you, and every single answer you gave turned the light back around. They never told you the results. Did you notice that? No formal conclusion, no summary handed across the table, no clean, clinical verdict delivered with the confidence they carried into the room at the start. Just the meeting ended. Chairs pushed back, papers gathered without urgency. Goodbyes that were professionally warm and emotionally hollow, and you walked out the same door you walked in through, unsentenced, unbroken, unresolved, which is the one outcome they had absolutely no protocol for. Oh, the exquisite dysfunction of that. An entire architecture of judgment with no place to put the verdict because the verdict would not cooperate. I want to talk about what happens to a person after a room like that. Because most people get this wrong. Most people walk out and feel relief. Pure, flooding animal relief. The relief of a body that was braced for impact and did not receive it. And relief is honest. Relief is human. But relief is not the same as understanding, and without understanding you will walk into the next room they build for you, and there will be a next room, completely unprepared for the version of the trap they will design after studying everything you did in this one. Because, oh, they are studying. Right now, in a room you are not in, with coffee going cold on a table, they are going through everything you said, looking for the crack they missed, the question they should have asked differently, the pressure point they did not press hard enough, the moment they escalated when they should have gone quiet. They are not finished with you. They are just rewriting the script. And here is the third twist, the ethical one. The one I have been keeping until now because it requires everything that came before it to land properly. Are you ready? You were right to stay calm. You were right to answer precisely. You were right to let their performance collapse under the weight of its own construction. All of that, correct. All of that, necessary. But here's the thing about winning inside a room that was designed to be unjust. Winning inside an unjust room does not make the room just. It makes you the person who survived it. And survival is not the same as justice, not even close. Oh, I know that stings in a way the whole room full of questions did not, because you did everything right. And the system that produced that room, the people who signed off on it, the culture that made it acceptable to pre-write someone's verdict and call it a process, none of that changed. None of that was held accountable. None of that sat in a too low chair and answered for itself. That is the wound underneath the victory. And I will not let you walk away from it just because the surface story feels clean. You outperformed their trap. Beautiful, true. But a person who only ever learns to outperform traps will spend their entire life becoming more sophisticated at surviving systems that should not exist. And at some point, the question shifts. It stops being, how do I survive this room? And it becomes, why does this room keep getting built? Who keeps authorizing the construction? And what do I do with the fact that I now know exactly how it works? That question is where most people stop. They stand at that threshold, look into what it implies, feel the size of it, and they go back to practicing survival. Because survival is familiar. Survival has a method. Survival does not require you to become something that makes the people around you profoundly uncomfortable. But I am not most people. And I do not think, I really do not think, that you are either. Because most people in that room, with that much controlled pressure applied with that much precision, would have given them something. A flinch, a fracture, a single unguarded sentence they could have lifted out of context and framed on the wall of their justification. You gave them nothing. Not from coldness, not from strategy, from something rarer and more dangerous than both, from knowing exactly who you are deeply enough that no arrangement of chairs and lighting and loaded questions could make you temporarily forget it. That is not a skill they can test for. That is not a weakness they can map. That is the thing that lives underneath personality, underneath history, underneath every version of you they could research and chart and discuss in a room you were never supposed to know about. It is the part of a person that remains after everything performative has been stripped away by enough pressure applied for long enough. And when they found it in you, when all their architecture came down and what was left was simply, stubbornly, immovably you. I think some part of them recognized it, the way you recognize something ancient, something that was here before the room, something that will be here long after. And I think that recognition, quiet, unwilling, unspoken, frightened them more than anything they came prepared for. So here is what you do now. You do not celebrate. Not yet, not loudly. You walk out of this the way you walked through it, without performing. You carry what you learned not as a trophy but as a compass. You remember the shape of the trap, the weight of the chair, the specific texture of a question that is not actually a question. You remember the moment the room shifted. You remember that you caused that shift by doing almost nothing, by simply refusing to be anything other than precisely, uncomplicatedly, devastatingly real. And then, you go find the door they have not built yet, the one they do not know you are walking toward, the one that when you open it will not be a trap. It will be the room where you stop surviving and start deciding. They set up a perfect test to expose you, but what they exposed was a version of you even you had not fully met yet. And now you have. The question is not whether they will build another room. The question is whether next time you will bother walking in, or simply burn the blueprint.